This podcast features discussions about finances and money, which are general in nature. For personal advice specific to your circumstances, see a licensed financial planner or relevant qualified professional. Hi folks, welcome back to another episode of Looking Under the Hood. I'm Scott Malcolm and we're unpacking the money stuff. Now today we're going on a bit of a different journey. We're talking about the client experience. Getting financial advice can often be a really daunting experience. We're taught that talking about money is a bit of a taboo subject at the best of times. And then we move through our money life and sometimes that becomes a bit of a scorecard in how we rate ourselves, how we compare ourselves, are we successful, do we have enough of it? And then we roll into a financial advisor's office and we're there exposing all our good, bad, indifferent of our financial life and financial self. So it is a big process. Today I'm joined by Keith Barrett, a financial services journalist and PR consultant from Reverb Media, and Scott Miller, who I like to say is a recovering financial planner and now a fintech entrepreneur at Ascendium. We're unpacking the advice experience, but also talking about the legally required statement of advice, which advisors prepare and present to clients as part of that advice journey. Welcome along, Keith and Scott. Keith is the one with the accent, just for those playing along at home. But Keith, I'll start with you. What's one of your early happy money memories?
I have two that are quite closely linked, and they both come back to reward, I think. So when in Ireland, making your first Holy Communion is a big, huge event in your life, and you get lots of money from relatives. And I remember buying the sets of Lego. I can still picture them in my head today, the Lego sets that I bought with that communion money, having never had that amount of money to invest in an object. But then there was, this is a bit of a brag, but when I was in primary school, there was a spelling competition, and I won it the 5 years I was in the school. And you used to get a book voucher, and I used it to buy Famous Five books, and it became this running thing through my life. And I'm at the point where just last night I was looking at buying the full 21 set of the Famous Five for my 6-year-old. But that all started with being smart enough to win a spelling competition and then get the reward. I love it. What were the Lego sets that you got? It was one Lego set. It was a massive white starship, and it broke into 3 parts. So you had the command module at the front, which became a rover with wheels on the ground, and you had a midsection, and then you had the kind of jet part at the back. But all 3 of them assembled into one massive contraption. I loved that set.
Oh, that's great. What about you, Scott? What's one of your early happy money memories?
Well, mine's a bit different from Lego. I only realised what I did when I got older and started learning, going into university and everything, what I actually did when I was 5. So when I was 5, as a kid, you're like, Mum, Dad, can I have this? And the common response is, money doesn't grow on trees, so no. Mm-hmm. I thought to myself, I'll show you. So I'd saved up $1.20 back when I was like 5 years old. I was like, okay, I'm going to go plant this and grow myself a money tree. So I went out the backyard and I'm like, okay, well, if it doesn't grow, I don't want to lose all my money. So I'll put 20 cents in instead of $1. And then I come out, I keep looking at it for a couple months. I'm like, damn it, it's not growing. Okay, I'll just dig up my coin. And I couldn't find my 20-cent coin. And I thought to myself, lucky I didn't put the $1.20 in there. Only when I got older, I realized that what I was doing is portfolio management and allocating my money in a diversified setting. 20% in high risky money tree, $1 in piggy bank in bedroom. So that was
what a story.
What a great memory and what a great story. And the stats suggest that only about 20% of Australians actually go and get financial advice. And look, I'm really passionate about trying to make advice more accessible for people of all income levels, but the compliance costs are really starting to add up and add to this process, and it can become a big hurdle. Keith, I guess you've been around financial services for 20-something years. We talked prior to the show about some of the experiences you had when you got financial advice yourself. How was that process for you?
When I sat down with an advisor about 4 years ago, I would have considered myself fairly knowledgeable around financial services. I had edited the Chartered Accountants magazine for a number of years. I had been the managing editor and professional planner. So I would have considered myself to at least having better than an average understanding of the financial services kind of market. But I found the onboarding process a real challenge. I found a lot of the questions that I was asked made me feel like I hadn't thought enough about my own life, and I found it really confronting, particularly around insurance. You know, when we did a special meeting for 2 hours just on insurance, and I came out of that, my head was spinning. I found it really difficult to try and answer the questions the advisor was asking me on the fly for 2 hours straight.
Our industry is so information driven at the best of times, in that we've got to fact find, we've got to understand our client, we've got to get all this information out of people. And if you're trying to wrangle that in one meeting, that can be quite overwhelming at the best of times.
Yeah, it's you know, when you get thrown questions like, do you want to have university fees covered for your children? And my kids were 4 and 1 at the time. And then how many years of college do you want to cover them for? It felt really, really unnecessary. And the further we went down through that process, the more passive I became, because I became completely disengaged with it. And I think it's you know, I've worked in communications my entire life. I'm 25 years in the media, and my experience in 10 years around the advice industry is that it's really great at talking about best practice and compliance and costs and everything. But in 10 years, I've seen no emphasis at all in communicating to the customer or to the potential customer. And perhaps that's one of the reasons why the 20% or the 80% of the unadvised Australians, that number isn't really significantly changing.
You'd also mentioned some stats that you had from Professional Planner magazine, I think, around just the client engagement and how people went and got advice, but then sort of didn't get followed up, or they felt like they were sort of left out in the oasis of the world in regards to the planning environment.
That's a survey Core Data did. So it's a couple of years old. It's back in 2017, and it basically looked at licensees and tried to discover what the percentage of follow-ups after a first consult was. So how many times an advisor did or did not follow up with a potential client, and on average, 53% of potential clients that met an advisor never heard from the advisor again. And then on the other side of that, when you look at what the potential customer's intention of going back to the advisor was, in the worst case, 60% of prospective clients said they had no intention to go to a second meeting. But in the best case, the best performing licensee, 40% of people who met an advisor said they had no intention of following up. So there's if 20% of Australians are advised, and they're the people that made it through the getting a phone call back from an advisor, then if just the callback rate was 100%, then that could potentially be 40% of Australians being advised. But that 20% hasn't moved, to my knowledge, in 5 years plus. It's a static number, and despite initiatives like Financial Planning Week, etc., if that number isn't moving, then why aren't more Australians getting advice? And is it a cost issue? Is it a understanding issue? I'm not sure.
I'll bring Scott into the conversation. What's, I guess, your view in that client experience? Like, again, from the planning process when you were in the advice space, how did you wrangle that, or how did you come across that?
Yeah, so when I was a planner, when I first started out, this was pre-Royal Commission. I went through FOFA and BID, etc. I found that I was spending about 80% of my time with clients and engaging with them, building the relationship, developing strategy, and about 20% of my time on paperwork. Now, the paperwork that I worked on is what the clients actually saw. The statement of advice, fine. It's what was actually value add to them. And then once you had FOFA, BID, Royal Commission, FASIA, what happened was the time inverted. So I was spending 80 to 90% of my time on paperwork that the client would never see, but that my licensee required me to do, which added no value, no benefit. And I don't recall a single client that's ever asked to see all the documentation. Correct that. I had one client who was a consultant at EY. And he goes, well, I want to see all your notes, all your research. I said, okay, well, I'll just go get my admin to print it off. And I walked in with about 200 pages of research, fact find, strategy paper, file notes, and SOA. And he looked at it and went, okay, never mind. So even though to see what I did, he didn't want to actually go through 200 pages, which is what I had to do to actually deliver superannuation and insurance advice. Yeah, so what I realized was I couldn't help clients anymore. I was basically, I can only service 100 clients in this country as a planner with the current compliance framework. So that's what actually got me to transition out of planning, because I'm like, okay, well, all the technology is only focused on the Band-Aid solution or one part of the process, but the pain point, which means I can't work with more clients, is A to B. So that's why I set off and built Ascendium, which has actually got that time down to a couple hours compared to the FPA's reported 26 hours to deliver advice.
Do you want to just give us a bit of background as to what Ascendium actually does?
Yeah, of course. So Ascendium was built out of a passion to help planners provide more financial advice to more consumers. So what we wanted to do is get advice down to intraday. So being able to develop comprehensive advice the day you see a client and present it the next day. That's been our goal. So the co-founders and I, Sharon Lee and William Kim, we built this system. Now what this system does is it's meant to be used by planners with clients. Now, as a result of that, by engaging with the client in a live scenario within technology, and then being able to build the compliance framework and legislation into the system, it means that every piece of advice that a financial planner produces within Ascendium will meet their licensee compliance rules and the ASIC frameworks. Therefore, if a planner is using Ascendium and you're getting advice from a planner with Ascendium, you know that it's coming tomorrow, and you can rest assured you're covered.
When you are getting advice, I guess the thing, because again, people listening might not have been to see a financial planner before, might not have a total appreciation for some of these things. Scott, I'll stay with you, but I guess what are some of those documents? So you mentioned a few of those. Like if we unpack some of those a little bit further. So again, there's file notes, there's strategy papers, there's statements of advice. I guess what are those in context if we're sort of explaining those to general public out there?
Yeah, of course. So we really have four main documents or compliance requirements in the advice process. So first of all, you have the fact find. This basically will be a documentation of all the client's personal financial information, as well as they want to achieve and why, and what discussions you had around those. So that's basically forms the foundation of the advice you're going to provide. So this is something that clients engage with. The next you have is a strategy paper or a working paper or a bid paper or a research paper. This is basically a document that's on the planner's records to justify why they are recommending a particular piece of advice, or why are they recommending a particular strategy, and why are they recommending a product for that strategy. Every planner I know always focuses on strategy, and product is literally the last thing they think of. A product is used to enable a strategy, but a strategy itself is actually where the value is.
So true.
Yeah, the strategy document is usually what auditors or compliance teams review when they review a file. So it has to be good quality. The other one is file notes. So a lot of clients don't realize this, but after a meeting you have with a planner, they have to document every conversation, mannerism, how you were disposed emotionally, physically, how you presented in the meeting, what you conveyed in the meeting, how you received what they said back to you. These file notes of a 1 hour meeting will take 1 to 2 hours to actually complete. Now, anytime a planner emails, calls, texts, has a meeting with a client, there has to be another file note encompassing that conversation or engagement. They then have to do file notes when they call a super fund, an investment fund, an insurance fund, whenever they do anything in relation to the process. So these file notes are what make up like 10 hours of the process. And it's just basically a record of what was conveyed and said. The last one is the statement of advice, which is a byproduct of everything that came before it. In this statement of advice, you really have two approaches. You have what's classified as an IFA market planner and an aligned planner. So an SOA is very different for both those planners. An SOA for an IFA is usually much more simpler because it's designed to meet the ASIC framework and Corporations Act. And then you have a licensee SOA, which is basically you're looking at your AMPs, your IOOFs, where if you have a planner from there, an SOA for a superannuation advice may be 60 to 100 pages. And all it is mainly legal disclosures which they've put in to cover the company. But ultimately, a lot of people forget it all falls onto the planner. The relationship the planner has, the advice they provide, and it all comes back to them. So those are the 4 key documents, which is why they have to get those right. But the current process in the planning industry is all manual. So if you're wondering why advice takes 12 weeks, it's because they have to manually prepare these documentations because they haven't been provided the technology to enable it, which is what we do. So that's part of the actual planning process and the 4 documents that you're really going to be addressing with.
I guess it is a byproduct, as you say, of Royal Commissions, of making sure that there is a framework for protection and keeping people within the industry, making sure they're doing the right things. But the timeframes on advice is often a big frustration and a big tension point. And I think it is that, I guess, that instant gratification world that we live in, people just want to have the information straight out at the end of the day. What do you think, again, either as a client experience perspective or even for people considering it, engaging with advice, what are some of the things that you think people should be looking for if they're, feeling a bit overwhelmed about, right, want to go and see an advisor or not sure what questions to ask or where to go? Keith, have you got any insights as to what you'd tell yourself 4 years on before you go and see an advisor, some of the things that you would suggest?
I think a lot of what's just been talked about is really valid. You know, I think my advisor experience a few years ago was with a large licensee. So it was a volume game for that advisor. He had a certain amount of clients that he needed to have to be sustainable as a business, etc. By the time my statement of advice came, I never opened it. All I wanted him to do was to be managing helping me manage my money, looking after my super. I don't think I ever opened the statement of advice, to be honest.
Yeah, wow.
Because it took 6 weeks by the time it materialized. And by that stage, I was so frustrated with the fact that I had all this motivation 6 weeks prior. And so I think that is an issue that I think overcoming that would be a massive benefit in keeping momentum. And I think that drop off rate that may occur with potential clients in that 6 week window would evaporate. In terms of approaching advice, again, I'm not advised at the moment, and I'm in a better financial position than I was 4 years ago, so I probably should be advised. But I have a reluctance to go down that road. I think if I do it again, I would probably look to find an advisor that I think suits. I think there's a greater range of advisors now compared to when you had, the bank-owned models where you had lots and lots of advisors all working in the same system, whereas there are so many independent advisors, young advisors, people that have come through and view the turmoil in the industry today as a great benefit to them for leveling the landscape when they're in their mid to late 20s and they're just getting started. And I think finding an advisor that perhaps aligns with your worldview a little bit would help. So maybe paying attention to the advisor's marketing or reading some collateral that they do. I think finding an advisor that you relate to and can take you on the journey would be a great help. And also educating yourself on what the onboarding process will be like, and then you won't be blindsided with questions that are really challenging.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a great tip there, Keith, in that I know as an advisor, I'm not going to be the cup of tea for everybody, and I've got a certain sort of values-based approach that I use with clients, and some clients don't align with that. And so it is just about asking the questions, sitting with the advisor. Most advisors will give you at least 15 minutes, half an hour of their time before you engage with them, and on a fee-based level, and just allow yourself the time to ask some of those questions and go through that process. Scott, flipping over to you, what about yourself? Any tips for new punters or those who are already getting advice around sort of what you'd suggest as a, again, recovering financial planner, but also as someone who's trying to shake up the industry a little bit and make some efficiencies there in the background? Yeah,
of course. I just want to go back to what Keith said, because that's in terms of the wait time to get his statement of advice, that's about standard in the industry. You're looking at between 2 to 8 weeks. And what a lot of people don't realize is there's always a cost to that statement of advice ranging from $500 to $1,500 to get it developed. So I guess what I want to highlight that what Ascendium's doing is removing that wait time, because we can produce statements of advice within 30 seconds. Now, Keith, if you didn't have to wait 6 weeks to get your statement of advice, would you have been more open and more fresh in mind to actually review that?
Yes, absolutely. I think absolutely, because you would see the fruits of that difficult conversation come to life that evening or the next day, and you could sit down and go through it and say, look, actually, in hindsight, I didn't answer that right. I think we need to revisit this.
Yeah, so if we look at cutting the elapsed time, and if you remove that cost as well, it can lower the cost of advice. And this is what is, when it comes to clients seeking advice, cost is always first point of mind. But after I've explained all the work that planners do in the back end, which they don't see, that's why the cost is actually so high. But if we can embrace technology, or you go to a planner that does embrace technology like Scott or other businesses, that means the time to deliver advice is shorter, it's more robust, and it's more efficient and can align with what you need. And I really have a passion in actually getting more advice to more clients, because you said there's 20% of clients that actually seek advice. Now, one thing a lot of people don't notice is the CPA Australia released a report that said if 100% of Australians that are eligible got advice, the economy would be better off by $630 billion a year.
Yeah, wow.
That would be reduction on Centrelink, that would be private health, it would be insurance, there would be more cash flow in people's pockets. There's an enormous opportunity for the benefits of advice. So that right there, $630 billion a year, is the value of getting advice with a planner. So yeah, like I remember one story. So how Afterpay reached more clients. I don't know if I've mentioned this before to you, Scott.
Right.
What they did was they actually sent emails to consumers who registered and wanted Afterpay, and said, if you want the stores that you regularly shop at to have Afterpay, send this to their contact us. And then businesses were speaking to Afterpay, actually saying, we're getting all this demand, and like, well, it seems your clients want it. So right now, consumers want a cost-effective delivery of advice that doesn't take 12 weeks. If we work together with clients and planners and technology, that's how we can solve that problem.
I think so. And I'm excited about the future of advice, because I think as we leverage technology more, as we take on board these changes, I mean, look, this industry's been changing. I started in this industry in 2001, and we have had consistent change regulation-wise going on in the background. And I think that is one of the great opportunities that exists in the market. Now, we do like to keep these episodes short and sweet, so I think we've been covering off on a few things. There might be a bit of technical stuff in there for people to engage with today, but hopefully there's some great information there for people who are considering advice, or people who have got advice in the past and just getting a bit more of an understanding of what they've received. So look, thanks so much for joining me, Keith and Scott. I'll put your contact details in our show notes as well. But yeah, thank you very much for coming along.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Scott. My pleasure.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Now, we have talked a bit about advice documents and the advice process today. Some of that still might feel a little bit overwhelming, but look, I would say to everybody, it's really about, if you are seeking out professional advice, check out the MoneySmart website, moneysmart.gov.au. There's some great resources on there about what to look for in finding a financial advisor. I think the things we've talked about today about aligning it to your values, aligning it to what you're trying to achieve as well. Make sure that you're getting involved with someone who does the sort of advice that you're looking for, and that you know you're going to be able to have open, honest conversations with about the money stuff. Good luck on the journey, and thanks for listening. Remember, if you like the show, please share it, rate us on Apple Podcasts. We'll see you soon.